We are delighted to welcome you for this international online symposium, The Future of Liberalism, Japan, France, and Germany in Global Context. This event is co-organized by the French Research Institute on Japan at the Maison franco-japonaise, the German Institute for Japanese Studies, and the Nippon Institute for Research Advancement. The symposium will be held from today to Thursday. During 3 days, we'll have the great pleasure to host 25 speakers during a roundtable and 5 panels. We start from today with a keynote speech with Thomas Piketty about his recent book, A Brief History of Equality. He will be discussed by Lisa Herzog and Shigeki Uno. We provide a simultaneous interpretation in English and Japanese. You can select the channel English or Japanese with the interpretation Zoom function. If you have any question during the conference, please use the Q&A function to write your question and we will read it during the discussion time. Before giving the floor to today's panelists, I would like to introduce Ambassador Setton, France ambassador to Japan. We appreciate his agreeing to be with us this afternoon to officially open this scientific event. So please, Ambassador Setton, the floor is yours. So please, Ambassador Setton, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you first for giving me the opportunity to say a few words at the opening of this symposium on the future of liberalism, which aims to bring together the perspectives of our 3 countries, Japan, Germany, and France. The holding of this symposium is first and foremost an important moment of Franco-German cooperation here in Japan in the field of human and social sciences. And if you allow me, I would like to say hello to my German colleague. It is indeed the fruit of an ongoing collaboration since the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the French Institute for Research on Japan at the Maison franco-japonaise and the German Institute for Japanese Studies in 2019. And I would like to pay tribute to the commitment and efforts of the directors of these 2 structures, Mr. Waldenberger and Mr. Thomann, to develop and implement this cooperation. My thanks also go to our Japanese partners, and in particular to the Nippon Institute for Research Advancement. Your contribution is particularly valuable in enabling the Maison franco-japonaise and the German Institute for Japanese Studies to provide France and Germany with knowledge about Japan and to propose a reflection on the major contemporary issues by adopting a global point of view in cooperation with the host country. And indeed, the question of the future of liberalism is a major issue for the Japanese, for the German, and for the French societies. Each is committed to the model of liberal democracy. Each is also confronted with developments that question this model. I'm thinking on of the current revolutions in information technology, biosciences, or digitalization, to name a few. These can be opportunities for our economies and societies, and they are also sources of new concern, challenges, and even threats to the functioning of liberal democracies. The context of the pandemic may also have challenged the liberal foundations of public policy and governance in democratic regimes, and some of the measures taken to fight against COVID have had a significant impact on individual freedoms, responsibility, social cohesion, and/or social control, but also on free trade, competitiveness, and market regulation. These developments ultimately raised questions about the capacity or willingness of our citizens to accept trade-off between civil liberties and public guarantees regarding health, environment, or security. To address these questions, speakers will debate from Germany, France, and Japan, but also from Austria, Canada, and Switzerland. And today, on the first day, 3 renowned researchers will debate in English and in Japanese in order to reach a wider Japanese audience. And I would like to thank Thomas Piketty, Shigeki Uno, and Lisa Herzog for their presence here today. And on the second and third day, panels will discuss in English the concept of liberalism, the debates it has generated and continues to generate in our countries, and its relation to technological developments. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you once again for attending this symposium, and I wish you an excellent conference and also fruitful exchanges. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Setton, for this very kind introduction of the symposium. I'm now very honored to give the floor to Ambassador von Goetze, Germany's ambassador to Japan.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I would like to greet my French colleague, Philippe Setton. Thank you very much, Philippe, for your excellent introduction. So I can concentrate on some aspects of the seminar. I would like to congratulate all those who have taken the initiative to organize the seminar, because obviously you have chosen a subject that is extremely important for today's world, and that you have chosen the 3 countries, France, Germany, and Japan, shows that we, the 3 countries mentioned here, are really at the forefront of discussing and defending liberalism in this world. When it comes to liberalism and as a lifestyle, yes, there could be a long discussion on a lot of subjects. Let me only mention 2 aspects that will be discussed. The first is freedom and science. So what does liberalism in science mean? In our German constitution, we have an Article 5 that stipulates art and science, research and teaching are free. And we have taken it for granted for a long time that this principle is the cornerstone of science everywhere, because otherwise science could not work. But we see now that we are confronted with countries that drive scientific research forward, but not necessarily with the freedom of research, science, and teaching. And given that in a digitized world, technology and scientific success also mean influence and power, the question whether our liberal view of scientific research prevails will also have a great influence on the economic state of our countries and of our influence in the world. How we will be able to follow up on so important technologies like Industry 4.0, cybersecurity, semiconductors, and so on. Artificial intelligence will play a decisive role in how strong our countries are in the world, and how they can also in other fields preserve our liberal views of humankind. That's why we strongly have to cooperate with those who have the same view on freedom of science as we have. We have a strong core group here with France, Germany, and Japan, but there are many others that share our views. And we have to see not only to the outside, but also to the inside, how we preserve the freedom of society, of science in our societies, so that we counter an increasing hostility to science in parts of our own societies. The second aspect that is discussed, and which I found equally important, is what freedom in business means. We have for a long time taken it for granted that only free market economies are well functioning and are superior to planned economies. Also, that needs to be proven again and again. And that globalization that we have also taken for granted for a long time is preserved in the way that we have been relying on for quite some time now, for decades. But the war in Ukraine has now shown the limits of globalization and the risk of one-sided dependency. On the other hand, deglobalization cannot be the answer. We should not fall back on trade barriers where they are not necessary. And we have always to be aware that globalization, with all its flaws, but has increased the wealth of our society. So there are a lot of important subjects to be discussed in this seminar. And I thank you again for organizing it, and thank all the participants, important participants that are ready and have declared that they are willing to devote their time to this important subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador von Goetze, for this insightful introduction. I now give the floor to Bernard Thomann, Director of the French Research Institute on Japan at the Maison franco-japonaise.
Thank you, Adrienne. Ladies and gentlemen, I would first like to thank Mr. Philippe Setton, Ambassador of the French Republic to Japan, and Mr. Clemens from Goetze, Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany to Japan, for agreeing to say a few words of introduction. It is a with great honor for us and an important mark of encouragement. The conference that opens today is a result of a long collaboration and preparation between the German Institute for Japanese Studies, the Nippon Institute for Research Advancement, and the French Research Institute on Japan at the Maison franco-japonaise. This collaboration was an opportunity to reflect together on the important theme of the future of liberalism and to strengthen the links between our three institutions. Such international collaboration is all the more important as this is a global debate that must go beyond the way it is posed in each country, even if the way in which it's posed in each country is important to take in account, because the use of the term liberalism differs according to the political culture of each particular nation. I would particularly like to thank the organizer of this conference, Adrienne Sala, Gilles Campagnolo, Franz Waldenberger, Leiko Kanda, and Sébastien Chevalier, for attracting so many prestigious researchers to the debate. In particular, today, Thomas Piketty will address the issue of equality, which is essential to the ability of liberalism to meet the social science, the social challenge of our time, and Lisa Herzog and Shigeki Uno, who will debate with him. Thank you very much. good talk, I will now give the floor to Adrienne Sala.
Thank you very much, Bernard Thomann, for your warm introduction. I would like now to briefly present the symposium. This event is a result of many long discussions with my colleague Gilles Campagnolo. Allow me a short archaeology of the idea. Our discussion about philosophical, historical, and institutional foundation of several concepts related to liberalism and socialism led to a first interdisciplinary concretization with an international workshop about justice and interest/judicialization in January, at the crossroad of our own respective research project. On the one hand, we integrated economic concept of interest to questioning the evolution of the theory of justice. On the other hand, we discussed the recourse to courts in liberal democracies to questioning the role and place of law. We then agreed to further develop the discussion and thinking. We thought that looking at the transformation of notion associated to liberalism in three different major liberal democracies, such as Japan, Germany, and France, would make sense. We had the opportunity to exchange with Franz Waldenberger, with whom we decided to expand the topics to the area of digitalization to address crucial issues of capitalism and globalization exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, including rights and liberty. We then had the pleasure to collaborate with Leiko Kanda from NERA, associating Japanese colleagues to this project. Thanks to this collaboration, during 3 days, we will listen to researchers from Japan, France, and Germany within 5 coordinated panels. Now, I would like to give the floor to Gilles Campagnolo, who is a full research director in economic philosophy at the French National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS, researcher at the French Institute on Japan, and associate member at London School of Economics. Gilles will present further the conceptual basis of this symposium.
Thank you, Adrienne. And thank you to all the people who presented this symposium, and for you, Adrienne, to remind how this started and how we were glad to initiate it and cooperate with our colleagues from Germany and Japan. Chronologically, historically, those versions of what we call now liberalism at present were embedded in the French Revolution times, in the German idealism philosophy, in the early stages of the Enlightenment, French, Scottish, Austrian, where the idea of free will individuals, the role of citizenship and the rule of law were established and discussed first. Hence, the consequence upon the word of liberalism. Liberalism meant the absolute right to freedom for individuals in all fields of the new civil society that established itself at the time. The word liberal was used as a meaning of progressive movement. Movement party in 1848, while the revolutions was all over Europe, France, Germany, etc. And it meant opposition to conservatives and to the party of the order. This meaning remained very strong as progressive in its US use. In America, a liberal is something like what we call a progressive on the left side of the political spectrum. In our countries, the meaning has been restricted mostly to the economic understanding of it. Free trade, free markets, competition. What is common to both meanings is tolerance and the free development of one's rights and one's individual will within society. The dichotomy of the word should not diminish the idea that there is both a larger diversity with many currents in liberalism and a continuity throughout history. The issue whether political liberalism based upon tolerance, moral and political freedoms, and economic liberalism based on free trade and markets and free competition, private ownership, is compatible, both protecting one another and permitting freedom of entrepreneurship in both citizen actions and practical economic undertakings. This issue has created a host of forms of liberalisms. There is classical liberalism, or a kind of systemic economic freedom, which respects free competition under the protection of private ownership of productive assets. There is welfare liberalism, advancing the welfare of individuals in line with economic growth, forms of welfare state that we know in our countries, Japan, Germany, France. There is liberalism made fair and critical, more social, egalitarian oriented, given and granting all citizens equal rights to basic liberties. There is libertarianism and forms that are called neoliberalism, ultraliberalism. They include the Austrian school, of which my works were kind of focus. Those forms should not make us forget the continuity of the main point, as philosopher Ronald Dworkin says in Matter of Principle, that the continuity of the concept is ensured through all those different variants. Then, what happened to the term for today to be so difficult to hear, so difficult to say, so difficult to accept in many places? Again, a little more history shortly. In the 19th century, the issue with liberalism came from the problem of poverty, pauperism, and that enhanced the rise of socialist ideas. Socialism was the challenge to liberalism. And actually, by inviting Thomas Piketty, friend and colleague for a long time, we want to stress that. We don't want to make a partisan of liberalism speak. We want to make a person who is challenging it and trying to show why this kind of thought has entered crisis. It was the case in the 19th century, it was the case in the 1930s, and at the time in Paris in 1938, the Walter Lippmann Colloquium was held with members from the German or the liberal schools, from the Austrian schools, from the French Polytechnique and Engineer School of Economics, in order to find again a path forwards for liberalism. It is with a different setting from Tokyo, not Paris. It is with different countries, France, Germany, Japan, that we want to ask something like the same, I think. What is a path forward? And why is it needed to ask that now? Because we see a convergence of crises. Of course, we all name it all the time: a financial, economic crisis, biodiversity, climate trouble, disease all over the world, like the COVID pandemic, and so on. There are mostly two major trends in those crises that I want to indicate as the general framework for this conference of 3 days. The first crisis is that with all those trouble, the attitude of economists as such has been at stake. It's an epistemological crisis. It at least dates back to the 2008 financial crisis. It implies that economics has to discuss its own roots and to find why the words of liberalism have been criticized so much and discussed so much. This impacts science as such. Therefore, science and some of its aspects are need to have philosophy and reflexive attitude put to use in order to understand them. Economics and liberal schools are related. They need philosophy to understand this epistemological crisis. That's the first one. The second one is about the crisis of liberal ideas and hopes more generally. The role of individual freedom today, which is not only a matter of market competition, but also of individual expression of free individuality and free liberties. what is granted, what we take for granted in our countries, in our liberal democracies, may not be the case everywhere, we know that, but we may even question what is happening in our world. Therefore, liberalism confronted to an epistemological crisis and a crisis of its ideals and their implementation is at stake now. On the one hand, major principles must be debated. On the other hand, details in the implementation of policies and what our colleague economists do are also discussed. Both general and fundamental principles related to a philosophical approach, then detailed and politically and economically relevant issues of economics and politics that specialists talk on. We want to make that available and palatable to the large audience, to the large public. This is also why someone like Thomas Piketty, who has enjoyed a worldwide audience, is important for that. He's challenging what liberalism can be. We want to, well, relever le gant and take up the challenge. This is the point. The decline and the influence of liberalism are not the future of liberalism. The future is to be able to answer the challenge that other ideas now put forth. Having said that, I give the floor back to Adrienne to present our main keynote speaker and the discussants.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gilles, for your presentation. So I would like now to introduce our keynote speaker, Thomas Piketty, who is professor at IHESS, École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales, and at the Paris School of Economics. He has done historical and theoretical work on the interplay between economic development, the distribution of income and wealth, and political conflict. These works have led to emphasize the role of political, social, and fiscal institutions in the historical evolution of income and wealth distribution. Thomas Piketty is also co-director of the World Inequality Lab and the World Inequality Database, and one of initiators of the Manifesto for the Democratization of Europe. He will be discussed by Lisa Herzog and Shigeki Uno. Lisa Herzog is professor in political philosophy at the University of Groningen since 2019. Her works are at the intersection of political philosophy and economic thought. She has published on the philosophical dimension of markets, both historically and systematically, liberalism and social justice, ethics in organization, and the future of work. In her research, she currently focuses on workplace democracy, professional ethics, and the role of knowledge in democracies. Shigeki Uno is professor at the Institute of Social Science at the University of Tokyo and executive vice president of the NERA. He specialized in the history of Western political thought and political philosophy. He has conducted research on democratic politics in the United States, France, and Japan, centering on the thinker of Alexis Tocqueville. He published in 2019 Theories of Equality and Inequality by Kodansha Academic Bunko Publisher and received the Ishibashi Tanzan Prize for his book, What is Democracy, in 2021. So thank you very much. And I just give the floor to Thomas Piketty.